Hey folks, it's not too often that I get two trucks side by side, and so I thought it'd be kind of fun to do a comparison video between the Ram and the GMC. Now, obviously these are not two identical trucks, but I figured if you're in the market for a truck, whether it's a GM product, the GMC or the Chevy, or the Ram, whether it's a 3/4 ton or a 1 ton truck, the cabs and the basic features of the trucks are going to be the same. So obviously over here on the GMC, it's a 2500 HD, it's a 3/4 ton, whereas on the Ram over here, it's a 3500, it's a 1 ton. Over here, it's a short bed single rear wheel. Over here on the Ram, it's a dually and it's a long bed. Over here, we've got a gas engine. Over here, we've got a diesel engine. So we're going to ignore those differences and really just focus on more what is common across the Ram lineup, the GM lineup. And this video I think is especially helpful for you if you're in the market and you're cross-shopping these two vehicles and you're just trying to figure out what's the big difference between the two. I'll also point out that this is a 2024 GMC Sierra 2500 HD, whereas this is a 2021 Ram 3500. Now, to be fair, Ram has not changed a lot for the 2024 model year, and I'll try to point out those differences. There's really only a few, whereas over here on the 2024, GMC just refreshed this for this model year. And so I still think it'll be a helpful comparison. And then last thing I'll point out is this is an SLE trim, which if you're familiar with the GM kind of lineup, this is one step above a work truck. However, if you didn't catch my build video on this, I'll put a card up above. This is a very well optioned SLE. Over here we've got a Laramie, which if you're familiar with the Ram lineup, Laramie is not the highest trim level, but it's toward the higher end. And so you might be thinking, well, these have nothing in common. It's not an apples to apples comparison, but you will be surprised how much this one over here, the lower trim level, tracks with the Laramie, the higher trim level over here. And again, we're really looking more for platform differences. And so that's going to be the focus of today's video. All right, so that being said, I've got a total of 12 categories that I'm going to run through real quickly and compare the two trucks side by side. These are just 12 categories that I came up with on my own, by the way. And basically, whoever wins each category will get 1 point. If it's a tie, then they both will get a single point. So first category is going to be on appearance. And this is going to be very similar across the different trim levels. There's going to be some minor variances. You can check out the Ram here. And in my opinion, the Ram has kind of a sportier, more aggressive appearance. It's got a little bit more attitude overall. Now this does have the night edition package, which I think only adds to that with all the blacked out accents and everything. But I mean, it is a sharp looking truck. And when I compare the two side by side, I just think the Ram has a little bit more attitude. Nothing wrong with the GMC over here. I think it looks really sharp. To me, all this speaks more to, hey, I'm here to get the job done. I'm a sharp, classy looking truck. Whereas on the Ram, it's got a little bit more attitude. Now, this is a very subjective category, but I'm gonna say in terms of appearance, the Ram wins on this one, so +1 for the Ram. Next category, let's talk about the tires. And tires are kind of important because you don't really get to choose what vendor of tire comes with your truck. I mean, typically the manufacturer's going to come up with a supplier for their tires and then stick with that for several years. So on the Ram over here from the factory, I've replaced these. They have Falcon Wild Peaks now, but from the factory they came with Nexans. And that's pretty much going to be standard across the board if you get a dually Ram truck. If you get a 3/4 ton or a single rear wheel, chances are it's probably going to be Firestone tires, which in my experience are not the best. I had a 2016 3/4 ton with the Firestones. Wasn't super thrilled with the life I got out of the tires. Over here on the GMC, again, it's a 3/4 ton. These have the all-terrain tires. It's the Goodyear Wrangler Trail Runner ATs. And I believe on the dualies, you're going to get Michelin's. At least that's what I had on my 2019 Chevy 3500. And so on the tires, I'm going to give GMC the win on this one. I mean, between having Goodyear tires on the 3/4 tons and then the Michelin's on the dualies, those two tires are much better than the Nexans and the Firestones that Ram is using. I'm not sure why Ram is still using those, by the way, on their trucks. I think that's a big change they need to make for the next model year. So for tires, I'm going to give +1 to GMC. Next, let's talk about mirrors, because on a heavy-duty truck, mirrors are super important so that you can see around your trailer. Again, guys, this is a 2021 Ram, and as you know, they did redesign these mirrors for the 23 going to the 24 model year, and so these mirrors look different than they do here on my 21. In fact, they look very similar in design and function to these mirrors on the GMC. I've got both of these out in the towing position, by the way, in the furthest position out. And so these are really great. I mean, you can extend these out and really see around your trailer, and then you just kind of push them in. Mine are just manual, some are powered. But basically, Ram has gone to a very similar setup on their 24s. And so if I was going to evaluate these two trucks based on the mirrors and factor in how they've changed it on the 24s on the Ram, I'd really say that it's pretty much a wash between the two. The mirrors are going to be about the same. So +1 to the Ram and +1 for the GMC. Next up, let's look at the cab size and compare between the two. And by the way, if you're looking in the video and thinking that the GMC looks substantially larger than the Ram, it's probably because it is significantly taller, especially on the front here, the hood area. We're going to be comparing specifically just the cab sizes over here. And I'm going to be measuring the door sizes. So first I'm going to do the driver door on the Ram, and we're looking right at about 43 inches across. Compare that over here to the Sierra, and we're looking at 45, just over 45 inches. So a little bit larger here on the Sierra. Let's check the back as well. On the Ram, we've got a total of 40 inches for the rear cab. And then on the GM, we've got 42. So I would say overall, just looking at the raw measurements, clearly the GMC is the winner here. I mean, it's a more modern cab. And it seems like every generation of trucks, all the manufacturers make their cabs bigger and bigger and bigger. And I think that is the exact case here with this latest 24 Sierra HD. So I'm going to give the win to the Sierra 2500 on this one as well. And I mean, really, guys, I think in this case, when it comes to trucks, bigger is always going to be better. Next, let's look at the interiors of both trucks. So over here on the Ram, you can see inside, it looks absolutely stunning. I mean, they've got all kinds of different colors and accents and stitching. I mean, everything just looks really, really sharp. And you know, Ram has always been known for having kind of the top level interiors among the competition. And I just think when you look here, there's just something interesting to look at in every direction. And it just really has a very nice aesthetic inside the truck. Then if we hop over here on the GMC, obviously this is an SLE trim level compared to the higher Laramie on the Ram, but I'm gonna try not to let that interfere with the ratings here. But check this out, guys. This is all brand new and freshly redesigned for 2024. And you know, in my opinion, Chevy and GMC, they always kind of lacked on the interior side in general, kind of lagged behind the competition and just looked very plain. But I will say this 24 redesign, I mean, check this out, guys. It looks really sharp. There's a lot of different textures going on across and different lines and elements that visually I think look really, really sharp. So I will say that GM really upped their game with this 24 redesign on the inside. I think things look really sharp. However, back here on the Ram, I will say that even though this is a Laramie, and you know, setting that aside, I do think Ram still has some of the best looking interiors overall when I see them side by side. And so for that reason, I'm going to give the Ram the win on this, so +1 for the Ram. All right, next category, we're gonna be looking at overall driver comfort between the two. So let's start over here on the GMC. And I'll say the first time that I hopped in this truck and started driving it, I felt like I just had a lot more visibility out the front windshield compared to the Ram, which I was accustomed to. Now, I've measured the distances and everything, and it's about the same. So I don't know how to describe it, but it feels like I can see better out the front windshield. However, I will say that the hood, you can see, is very tall on the GMC, and so you can't really see over the hood. But otherwise, in terms of comfort here, you know, everything is easy to reach. One little nuance that I'll point out is in the GMC, they have a dead pedal over here. I am 6'2" and 5/8 inches tall, and for me, this dead pedal sticks out way too far. And so on longer trips, I find me slipping my foot off to the side, kind of behind the brake pedal, because this dead pedal is just sticking out too far. In terms of seat comfort, obviously this is cloth versus leather in the Ram, so we're gonna ignore that, but it does have some side bolstering here on the seat. You've got good lumbar in the seat. I've actually driven this truck for a little over 10 hours when I picked it up on the way home, so I spent a lot of time in here, and it was very comfortable overall. And next up, we'll look on the Ram overall driver comfort and visibility out the front here. So I've owned this truck for a little over 2 years, and I've always thought it has really good visibility out the front. For some reason, the GMC, it just seems like I can see a little bit more with the windshield. Not sure if that's going to show up in the video, but I mean, everything's real comfortable, easy to reach here, all the knobs and buttons. By the way, guys, both seats are in the same position for where I like to drive, where I'm comfortable here. I will point out that I think I have a little bit more leg room here in the Ram. They don't have a dead pedal kind of sticking out right here from my left foot, and so I can stretch it out. I got plenty of room right here, so it's a little bit more comfortable on the feet there. And then as far as the seats go, again, these are leather, but I'm not factoring that in. They have some really nice bolstering on the sides, and maybe I would say the Ram seats are just ever so slightly firmer overall. It's got really good lumbar support in the back, and when I sit in the Ram seat and then go to the GMC and then back to the Ram, I consistently find myself liking just the way the seat feels overall. Now again, I've owned this truck for over 2 years, so maybe my body's just used to the Ram, but I mean, it just seems like it has a little bit more bolstering, a little bit more support across the seat, and combined with the fact of that dead pedal issue I mentioned on the GMC, I'm going to give the win over here to the Ram. So +1 for overall comfort on the Ram. All right, guys, next up, let's talk about infotainment options. So we're in the GMC over here, and I'll go ahead and start it up. And this one is redesigned for 2024. This is a 13.4 inch diagonally across here. And notice how it's in the landscape position. Now, for me personally, I find that screens that are in the landscape position for me are a little bit more functional. You can put more of what you want on the screen and see more compared to a vertical orientation. I'll also point out that for 2024, GM has gone to an Android-based infotainment system. Now, this is still compatible with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. That's something different, you know, with your phone. But the base system here that's running this entire infotainment system is Android-based. And I think that's a step in the right direction because, you know, Chevy's system was always a little bit finicky. And I think that moving to the Android platform, the overall UI, the user experience and everything is just a lot nicer. Plus, if you ever forget your phone, I mean, this basically replaces it because it has Google Maps and everything else that you're accustomed to using on your phone. So I think it's a really slick system. It's really high resolution. And, you know, it's basically the latest, greatest offering from GM. Then over here on the Ram, when I ordered this truck, I actually ordered it with the 8.4 inch display. And for those who are Ram fans, you know that this also comes in a larger 12-inch display that runs vertically and pretty much covers up this entire center area. You still do get some buttons off to the side in that 12-inch version, but I opted for the 8.4 because at the time, having that vertical orientation, you basically have two screens kind of stacked one on top of the other. And so if you're using Android Auto or Apple CarPlay, at the time, it would only fill half the upper screen. I think now Apple CarPlay does fill the entire 12-inch screen. So let's just pretend that this did have the larger 12-inch screen, and let's just focus more on the actual Uconnect interface versus Chevy's, you know, new Android-backed system there. So I will say that the Uconnect system, I have this system in a Durango SRT and other cars that I've owned, is very, very easy to use. I mean, people talk about it all the time, how well it's laid out and everything, and I 100% agree with that. It is super easy to use. So I guess what I'm trying to say on this one is it's going to be a really close call, a lot of subjectivity in the end. I mean, I really like the Uconnect. Of course, the GM has the larger 13.4 inch screen, but let's just pretend for a moment that I had the larger 12-inch screen in here and kind of compare that to the 13.4, so it's more apples to apples. And here's what I'll say about that. Like I mentioned before, I really think horizontal screens, landscape screens in cars, for me at least, are more usable, more functional. And so based purely off of that, even if this had a larger 12-inch screen, and even though I really like the Uconnect interface, I really like GM's horizontal layout in the 13.4-inch size. And although I haven't used the GM product a lot, I have very high hopes for it since it is Android based. And so for that reason, I'm going to give the win on infotainment to the GMC. It was a really close call, but +1 here on the GMC. Next, let's talk about cameras. And believe it or not, both of these trucks pretty much have the same camera system, the same 360 surround system, but let's compare how it looks both on the Ram and the GMC. So let's look in the Ram first. I've got the 360 camera pulled up and it's split screen like most of the vehicles are nowadays. You've got rear views, a wide angle, you've got a front, a narrow front. Of course, you've got your chimsole camera. You've got kind of a side to side looking down the side of your truck here in the Ram. And the only thing I'll say about their camera system, it works great, but the only thing I'll say that I don't like is the resolution leaves something to be desired. It almost seems like it's standard definition coming to the screen here. It looks, fuzzy, a little bit grainy. And I'd like it to be a little bit higher resolution. And yes, this is a 2021 Ram, but it is my understanding that even for the 2024 model year, the camera system remains unchanged, including the resolution. Now over here on the 24 GMC Sierra, let's take a look at its camera system here. Got it pulled up here, and you can see we do have a little bit larger screen. It does crop it though, and it's got really good resolution. You can go through and see all the different cameras, similar angles. I would say with the GM product, you've got probably more angles combined. It's like they took the number of cameras they had and got a little more creative with them. And I would say overall, just comparing the two based purely on resolution, the GMC seems to have ever so slightly higher resolution. I mean, there's still some different angles you look at here that still look a little bit fuzzy, but it seems like overall the resolution is better here on the GMC, and there are a few more camera angles in the end. So for that reason, I'm going to give the win to the GMC, so +1. Next, let's talk about the safety systems in both of these trucks. And even though this is a Laramie trim level and this is an SLE, believe it or not, they pretty much have the exact same safety options. So we have, forward collision alert on both of them and avoidance. We've got the blind spot monitoring, the lane departure warning, the adaptive cruise control. And so let me talk about what some of the differences are in the way those systems are implemented or executed between the two different brands. And I'll just say first on the Ram with the adaptive cruise control, Ram kind of splits up the adaptive cruise control separate from the regular. So you have your regular cruise right here and then your adaptive cruise control. And so you go into either of those modes separately. Whereas over here on the GM, they basically combined those methods together. And so there's only a single cruise control button, and it defaults to going into the adaptive cruise control. And then if you want to cancel it, it warns you on the screen to cancel it kind of when you set it. Now I've driven this for about 10 hours after I picked it up on the drive home. And so I've got quite a bit of experience with the adaptive cruise control so far on the GM. And what I will say is that after using both the GMC and the Ram adaptive cruise control, both of them work. I feel very safe while using both of them. But sometimes I noticed the GMC hesitated a little bit with different, transitions on the road, almost like it got a little bit confused. It didn't do any kind of sudden braking or anything. It just kind of slowed down a little bit. Whereas the Ram, I think the overall refinement of that adaptive cruise control system, it just seems to be a little bit better than the GMC. Again, not that it wasn't working properly or that I felt unsafe or anything like that on the GMC. It just seemed like it was a little more refined on the Ram. And then when it comes to safety features, the only other difference that I've observed between the two is with the lane departure warning. They both have the feature. On the Ram, it doesn't bing or vibrate the seat or do anything like that. It basically takes the steering wheel, and it's almost like someone in the passenger seat is grabbing the wheel and correcting it for you and kind of gently nudging you back into your lane. And of course there's a visual indicator on the EVIC as well on the Ram, but that's how the lane departure works on the Ram, whereas over here on the GMC, it's more passive and it just beeps when you start to get out of your lane. And so that's a little bit different. You know, if I'm looking at all the safety features combined and how they operate, I do like the way the adaptive cruise works as far as setting it on the GMC, but in terms of how it actually works, I like the adaptive cruise better on the Ram combined with the lane departure warning, the way it just kind of gently nudges your wheel over on the Ram. So for those reasons, I'm going to give the Ram the win on this one. So +1 for the Ram. Next, let's talk about overall ride comfort between the two trucks. Now I know this is a dually and a 1-ton truck, whereas this is a 3/4 ton and a single rear wheel. But let me just point out some differences in the suspension. First up front on the Ram, we've got a solid front axle versus independent front suspension on the GMC, but really in the back I think is where the biggest difference is. So we've got standard leaf springs on the GMC on the 3/4 ton and the dually, whereas on the Ram, if you had a 3/4 ton Ram, it would have coil springs, which are definitely more comfortable in terms of ride quality. And then if you go to a 1-ton, whether it's a single rear wheel or a dually, you're going to get traditional leaf springs. However, with Ram, they do offer air suspension, and when they do that, they basically reduce the number of leafs you have in the leaf pack there, and then let the air suspension basically make up for the rest. And so what that does is it makes the ride arguably more comfortable here on the Ram, because that air suspension can be adjusted and fill the bags up or deflate them depending on what's in the back of the truck. So I've driven this truck over here, the 3500, for over 2 years, and I gotta say, you know, some people complain about dualies being rough, but I think the Ram with the air suspension is very, very comfortable, especially unladen. Now, I'm not saying over here with the GMC that it's not comfortable or that it's rough riding or anything like that, but I do think between their 3/4 tons on the Ram having the coil sprung suspension, and then on the dualies, and you can even get it on the 1-ton single rear wheel, it does have those airbags that you can get on the back. I do think the ride is arguably better overall on the Ram. And so for that reason, I'm going to give the Ram the win on this one, so +1 for the Ram. Next up, let's talk about bed functionality, you know, bed utility, because let's face it, if you're buying a truck, having a bed that's functional and useful is a major factor. So over here on the Ram, we've got a basic bed. Of course, this is a dually, so it is longer. It is 8 foot. There is a step here that is deployable that folds out to help you get in the back of the bed, but otherwise it's pretty basic, pretty simple. And this is the same setup if you got a 2024. Compare that over here to the GMC. Of course, they have the multi-pro tailgate with all the different functionality. You've seen that before. That is pretty slick there. And then they've got these integrated corner steps on both sides to help you get into the truck. And then they've added this one here closer to the cab. So I really think these are extremely functional between the steps and then this multi-pro tailgate, all the different things that you can do, especially if you have a shorter bed. This is a shorter bed, but it is 6'9". If you got the Ram short bed, it would be 6'4". So that's about a 5-inch difference, and that can make a big difference when you're hauling cargo and everything. And so for those reasons, I'm gonna give the win to GMC. I mean, I think they are strides ahead. I think Ram really needs to step up their game on the 25 or 26 model year when they do the big refresh. So +1 for GMC. And then last category is going to be payload, and this is a big one. Arguably one of the most important factors when buying a truck is how much payload, you know, how much can you put in the rear of the bed, whether you're hauling stuff or towing things, you know, with pin weight or tongue weight. Now, obviously the Ram is a dually, a 1-ton, and over here we've got a 3/4 ton. And so if we were to look at just purely the payload on these two exact trucks, the Ram is just north of 5,000 pounds, and then the GMC is just north of 3,300 pounds. But for just a moment, suppose that this Ram over here was a 3/4 ton gasser, so more of an apples to apples comparison. the payload on that Ram 3/4 ton gasser, whether it's a 21 or a 22, 23, 24, it's going to be right in the neighborhood of 2,800 to 2,900 pounds. Some of them might be as high as 3,000 pounds. That's on a Ram 3/4 ton gasser short bed. Again, over here on the GMC, as a 3/4 ton gasser with a short bed, 3,300 pounds. And you're gonna find that in general, the GMC product, the Chevy product, and even the Ford product in general, on their 3/4 tons, they're gonna be a little bit higher on their payload compared to Ram. And it's because on the GM product, at least, they've increased the gross vehicle weight rating by about 500 pounds on most models. Some models are 800 pounds. And so basically that's how they're giving you more payload, simply by increasing the gross vehicle weight rating. So it used to be that every 3/4 ton truck had a gross vehicle weight rating of 10,000 pounds. But over here on the GMC, this has a gross vehicle weight rating of 10,850 pounds. And so that's how they're able to give extra payload, the 3,300 pounds versus the 2,800 to 2,900 on the Ram, because they've simply increased that gross vehicle weight rating. Now, if we were to turn the tables and look specifically at dualies and 1-ton trucks and do that same scenario, most dualies are going to have a gross vehicle weight rating of 14,000 pounds, which is the case here on the Ram. So if I had ordered this GMC truck here as a dually, it would also likely have a 14,000 pound gross vehicle weight rating. And so in that case, the payload between these two trucks is going to be probably fairly similar. Again, it's just north of 5,000 pounds. That's going to vary based on the options and equipment that you get on the truck. And I would imagine it'd be pretty close to the same on the GMC. So it's really only on the 3/4 ton trucks and perhaps some of the 1-ton single rear wheel trucks where you're going to have a payload advantage on the GM product, whether it's a GMC or a Chevrolet. And again, it's because they're merely increasing the gross vehicle weight rating. But at the same time, that is the gross vehicle weight rating. And if you're doing any kind of towing, that payload is very important. And so I think that's something where Ram has fallen behind. I would be very surprised if in the next, big refresh, whether it's 25 or 26 model year, I'd be very surprised if they did not increase the gross vehicle weight rating on their 3/4 tons to kind of step it up and compete with GM and Ford. So for those reasons, because the GM has significantly more payload, all things considered, I'm going to give the win to the GMC, so +1. Okay, so if we total up the categories and the points allocated to each truck, we've got 6 points total for the Ram over here, and then we've got 7 points over here for the GMC. And so clearly the GMC is the winner on all those different categories. These are two great trucks. I mean, they both have their strengths and weaknesses, right? And I think what that score points to, the 6 points versus the 7, is that the Ram could probably use a refresh. The GMC just had a refresh for the 24 model year. The Ram really is in need of one, and I'd be surprised if they didn't do something major for 25 or 26. And if I were to rescore those trucks then, I imagine it would be a lot closer. But anyways, guys, I'm going to be doing a whole lot more videos on my new GMC Sierra over here, so definitely make sure you are subscribed. I hope you found this video helpful, and definitely let me know in the comments below if you agree or disagree how I scored everything. As always, thanks for watching.